Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Episode 4 of the Doomsday podcast, and it's a very special one because, boy, Ed Werder continues to come through. At some point, I think I booked one guest, perhaps, so far, but Ed Werder makes it happen again, and this time it is the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. What a amazing scene that was, and I want to set the scene for folks because we'll let them hear from Dak Prescott, but as we waited for Dak Prescott in this tiny little office at the back of the gorgeous David Yurman store over at North Park. Now, Ed, I have to ask you this first of all, and welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome to my own podcast. Thank you.
So great to have you. We were in there last night, and it's an event, and Dak Prescott, everybody's waiting. This place becomes jammed. It's about
people
200.
Could not get to the jewelry counters to look at merchandise at certain points in the evening. It was so full in the store.
And what I noticed is that hors d'oeuvres were being passed around.
They really weren't for you.
I don't think I was supposed to be involved, but I kept reaching out and grabbing every little slider I could. There was some form of a tomato, basil. I usually wouldn't go that route. It was beautiful. It had a great taste. Whoever does the catering for David Yurman, my compliments to you. But now, Ed, we were back in an office, and our man Mark, who records us and does a fabulous job, we're all back in this back office, and we're noticing right away there are at least, what would you say, 30 to 35 footballs that are with us in this office.
Requiring a signature. Not from us, of course.
No, they didn't want us to sign it. They wanted Dak. And, boy, there were these other lurking reporters from other newspapers that started kind of peeking in there. One even actually came in there and started trying to take drinks and food from us.
And another was shunned altogether, like told not to come.
Yes, and I will say this. When Dak, and he arrived, I don't know, he was 30, 40 minutes, but who's counting?
Late.
Yes. Yeah. And Dak arrives. I've seen this sport coat before, a gorgeous kind of what color is that?
He said it was raspberry. I asked him what color it was.
Okay.
He said it was raspberry.
I wouldn't think that. I would think more of like a fuchsia. So he comes in, and he's got these men that are, I don't know, 40s, 50s, and they're all in these gorgeous sport coats. That's what I kept thinking. I had a new sport coat that I was kind of proud of, but I thought, my gosh, these guys are all custom because these are big dudes. They're custom made.
You could have done a better job on the shirt.
Me?
You.
Oh, it was kind of a spring type pink color. Okay, sorry. It had a little bit of a wrinkle to it, probably. But that's okay. But anyway, there we are, and they're all crowded in there around us, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And Dak. Boy, Dak, he means business when he comes into a place. So I don't think Dak immediately recognized me. And I know that's hard to believe. I think most people in public know who I am. No, that's not true. But
I may have forgotten to mention that I would be accompanied by you on the...
Okay.
There's some things that people just need to learn when they arrive.
That's right. I met him, and he was very kind. Then he says, he turns to his guys, and he's like, right in front of me, I need to get this podcast over with quick. And so,
normally that's what I say when I walk in.
Exactly. So then you appear at the door. So this has already happened, and I'm already sort of feeling the pressure. And then it's like, okay, so he's going to sign while our guy Mark's holding a mic up to his mouth. He's signing. I'm already thinking, gosh, he's not going to be able to focus. I don't know about this. There's like 8, 9 people in this tiny little room, and you look at me, and you basically are like, go. Well, I paused for just a second to collect my thoughts.
Can we move this somewhere else? Can we get some of these people out of this room? And I'm like, Matt, sometimes you just got to go with it. Just do your job to the best of your ability, despite the circumstances, and that's what we did.
So we were off and running. The rest of the media that really wasn't invited, we were truly the invited folks. They were kind of peeking in there and trying.
It was shameless what they were doing.
It was unbelievable, and you know, kind of like we're invited.
So then I go outside the door when the interview's over, and from the Star Telegram is there,
just
and he's talking to. from the morning news. Should we not name their names?
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Keith, you might have to redact those names. Anyway, so there's two beat writers there, and the one who showed up later and found the door shut and locked to him says to the guy who was inside, "Did they already do the interview?" And he said, "Yeah, they already did it." And he said, "Well, how is it that the Cowboys Doomsday podcast gets priority with the starting quarterback over us?" And I had to explain to him because I was the MC of the event.
I never again in your life want you to feel compelled to explain anything to That is my advice.
I like that you use his middle initial.
That is my advice to you. Although he had his daughter with him last night, and that was fun to see. Big time gymnast. So we get into I like to add some of these asides.
I wish you knew as much about the football part of it as you know about his life.
I cannot tell you who's playing linebacker this year, but I can tell you all these family members. But we get into the David Yurman. God, you say it better than I do. David, you say it again. David
Yurman?
Yeah, I don't know. I say it kind of weird.
Who was there? He himself.
Oh my gosh, the real
the
guy,
namesake, the creator.
So I'm like, well, there's a an older gentleman, a very distinguished guy coming through, and as I do with most folks, I just jumped up to greet the man, and he goes, "Hi, David Yurman," and I'm just like, whoa, this is the man himself. And then we get into a nice sort of podcast discussion, and then I hear you, as only you could, explaining to him. I mean, within 2 sentences, you're like, "Yeah, I just got laid off."
He asked me. He asked me what I'm doing. What am I supposed to say?
I know, but I just think I don't know if David had been aware of all of this.
So what was I supposed to say? What was the right answer?
I don't know. I think you just say, "Hey, I'm here to MC." You don't have
he
to
said,
tell him
"What
anything.
do you do?" He asked me what I do.
I know, but you're like Ed Werder, and he
didn't know.
I
he
know,
had no idea.
But you don't have to say then. You don't have to go.
I said I worked for ESPN until recently. I mean, why not make him know and let him know that I'm available? Maybe he's looking for someone just like me.
He might. I hope. By the way, that merchandise is just gorgeous in there. And I come from jewelry. That's
what?
That's a strange thing to say.
From jewelry?
But my grandfather was a jeweler. In fact, I believe my grandfather was saved in part in World War II. He was about to get on a ship that was, I guess he would have been, 18, 19 years old, and he was about to get on a ship that ended up being sunk in the Pacific. And I could have lost my grandfather before he ever became my grandfather. And what happened was he had someone ride up to him right before he was to get on this battleship. I'm trying to think with USS. Anyway, they said, "We need you to open up a watch repair shop on Guam." So my grandfather spent the rest of World War II with his own watch repair shop on Guam. It was a lot safer place than being out in the water on the ship. And so that's how I got to spend
pretty amazing.
A lot of my life with my grandfather, who made it to age 86, and God rest his soul. But anyway, so I'm way into jewelry. So that's what I was talking to David Yurman. The man himself comes walking into the little area where we were set up to do our interview with Dak. Now, Dak was running a bit late last night.
But we got to talk a lot of football with Dak Prescott. We talked about his expectations for year 2. We spoke to him about the draft, which featured, just 2 offensive players taken by the Cowboys in the draft. And we spoke to him about the fact that it's a different dynamic this year with no Tony Romo in the quarterback meeting room and, no Jerry Jones shoving Tony Romo in the back to try to get Dak off the field.
I don't think anything like that was going to happen. I think folks will hear at the end of the interview, I get a little shot at Tony in. I thought it was playful. I thought Dak handled it well. I'll say this. Watching Dak in public now and spending a little bit of time that I did with him last year, boy, he has grown into this role. Now, he was always, I thought, an incredibly mature guy, even when he stepped in the preseason before we knew Dak was going to be Dak, before he was going to take over and basically, drive Romo into the broadcasting business, although most people don't get driven into the number one analyst role. He had a maturity about him. Boy, I thought that was interesting last night. First of all, I'd like to know who all those men were. Sometimes players will show up and they'll have a little bit of an entourage, and a lot of times it's like people kind of their age or friends. These guys were all well older than him in these gorgeous sport coats. I don't know exactly who they were. They weren't like bodyguards. Sometimes people travel with a little security. I mean, one of those guys was big enough to be
marketing guy.
Maybe,
and,
but I mean that was an impressive-looking group.
One was Eric Liebler, who runs Pro Camps, which puts on football camps for Dak and a lot of other top NFL players, including Rob Gronkowski and Drew Brees, for example, Patrick Peterson. And he was there, and he was orchestrating this as well.
I'm just saying, if you are who you hang around with, those guys were well-dressed, well-behaved.
I think more important than that was the fact that, Travis Frederick was there and Zach Martin was there, even after spending all day playing golf, which I like to do myself. And but it was nice that they came out and supported their quarterback in that way. They weren't being paid to be there. And they were doing it as a show of support for Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. There was one very tall gentleman with a beard walking around, and I just, for a minute, thought it was Gavin Escobar. Just because he kind of had
Tyrone Crawford may have been out there.
I did see Crawford. It was not Gavin. It turned out not to be Gavin Escobar. A lot of on my way
He's in
out,
Kansas City now. I think
I did what I normally do. Oh, Escobar's not.
He's not a Cowboy.
Yeah. All right. It has not worked out. Drafting tight ends around here has not worked out that well. And I do believe it is time. Dak Prescott joining the Doomsday podcast for the first of, I'm sure, will be many appearances by him.
Wow, this is the biggest audience we've had.
You have your sunglasses?
I apologize for leaving my sunglasses.
You need them. You need them right now. It is the Doomsday podcast. It is Matt Mosley with Ed Werder. And Dak, welcome to the Doomsday podcast. Do you know what the name Doomsday means in Cowboys lore?
Doomsday defense.
That's it.
Championship.
Hey.
Dak's signing a multitude of footballs as we do this, by the way.
Yes.
So let me ask the first question. It was interesting, I thought. Jason Witten said that as a quarterback, your voice is the one that needs to be heard. So what have he and the other veterans been doing to create opportunities for you to lead even more than you did during last season?
Leading kind of comes naturally to me for the most part. So for that aspect, it's just kind of me just doing the things that I've kind of been doing since I've gotten here. But being a rookie, talking back about last year, it's tough to go in there and to call the team up, call the offensive up as a rookie. And you've got Jason Witten, you've got Travis Frederick, you've got Sean Lee with the whole team. So it's been tough, but as those situations have come up in different workouts where it's just individualized guys or when it's the whole offense, Jason, Travis, Sean have all done a great job of pushing me and calling me out, Dak, breaking us down and things like that where throughout the workout I'm doing a good job of leading, but they give me a chance to break the team down and call it mine.
At this time last year, you were just hoping maybe to be the backup quarterback. Now you're obviously 13 wins into your career as a starter. Tony Romo is a former Cowboy. How does that change the equation and the expectations that you have?
I can't really say it changes the expectation that I have because for me it's all about just working hard, staying humble, knowing where I came from, knowing what it takes to be great. Football player, know what it takes to be a great person, know what it takes to be great in this league after 1 year, and it takes a lot of hard work and a lot more than what I've done. So for me, it's just about improving. And when I've got those great veterans around me that push me, that help me, it only makes things better and it only makes things funner.
Dak, what is the next step? Last year all the talk was, oh my gosh, he's got to go under center, he's got to do this and that. Now that you've had a year under your belt, this off season, where has been your focus? What are you trying to add to your game to be ready for this season?
I can't say there's just one situation, there's one specific thing that I've focused on if I need to get better in that. I mean, I'm only 1 year into this league, and I know what it takes watching guys like Tom Brady and Matt Ryan, what it takes to be successful, Drew Brees, what it takes to be successful in this league for a long time. So it's about improving my game altogether. And as you said, dropbacks was last year something I emphasized, and it's something that I'm continuing to emphasize is watching Matt Ryan. He's somebody that I've watched this offseason and the way they run their offense from under center, and it's the same offense that they run from the gun. So it throws the defense off. It doesn't allow them to guess and know what's coming with tendencies. And so that's just something I'm trying to get better at so we can run our offense from under the center, from the gun, and you never know.
Some people suggest that you'll have a difficult time matching your achievements last year because everybody who plays you now, their defensive coordinators are spending a lot of time studying your offense, studying you. But you have the same advantage, right? I mean, you have experience against the teams that you're playing in your division. for the third and fourth time this year. How do you see that equation balancing out?
Exactly what you said. They've got a year to watch film and to study what I do, and I've got a year to watch film and study what they do. So to me, that balances out. It's about me listening to my coaches, me trusting my teammates, believing in my ability, going out there and executing plays. I'm excited. I mean, I love when people doubt me. So to say it's going to be tougher, that's a challenge, and I'm excited, and I'm ready to take it on. I know I've got the right coaches and the right guys around me to make the most of the situation.
No. Jerry used to go to Troy, and he used to go to Tony and say, hey, look at some film. Look at this guy. What did they say to you? Did they lean on you and say, hey, what do you think about this certain guy? Did they come to you at all?
Yeah, there were certain guys, old teammates and whatever it may be, the guys that they asked me about. But I didn't have much of input on it. But on the simple fact of I think they know what I like. And drafting Ryan Switzer, drafting Noah Brown, the guys that they handled on the offensive side, I think they understand those are quarterback-friendly guys. A guy like Noah Brown can go up and go make big catches. Ryan Switzer who can get open. He's a form of Beasley. And I think they know the type of guy, the type of receiver I want. And they did an amazing job in this draft. So, I mean, I'm excited for what's to come, the new guys coming in.
In the Super Bowl era, there's only been 9 teams that have won 13 or more games in consecutive regular seasons, and every one of those, previous 8, made it to the Super Bowl. Is that something that you think this team's capable of achieving?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I know we can win every game that we lock in and we focus, and that we understand that we're the team that they have to beat, and we're not. It's not the opposite way. And so, for me, for the most part, it's not going in the season and it's like, hey, we need this many wins or we don't need to have this many losses. It's about putting ourselves in a position to peak at the right time. It's about putting ourselves in a position to peak when playoffs hit. So we're running and we're moving and we're playing our best when playoffs hit, and we can push forward to the last game of the season.
Matt, it seems like Dak is now checking himself in the mirror, and he's signed all the footballs he's going to sign. So I think our time is coming to an end.
Can I ask one more?
One more, and that's it. Hurry it up.
It's time to get ready for the public.
Dak, I get it. And you do look nice, if you don't mind me pointing out
what color is that?
It's a raspberry.
Raspberry.
I was curious. You spent so much time answering questions. Oh, how was Tony for you? How was Tony last year? And you gave a very politically correct answers, which may have been true, in fact. What was Mark Sanchez like for you? Because from what I could tell, and from the people I talked to, including your quarterbacks coach Wade Wilson, he played a big role in your success.
And he's now in Chicago, right?
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
He did. And I'd say for the most part, he was almost a mental coach. He was the guy that he helped me out throughout practice, during the week. If throws weren't on point, he'd say, use your feet a little bit more, drive through the ball, and I'd find out those are the things that would work for me in practice. And we'd get to the games and we'd head into every game, and he'd have these little checklists of things that he would always say to me. And one of them was like, you know what today is? It's a day for nothing new. It's a day for the same footwork. It's for the day for the same reads. It's a day to be you. And things like that just help you get going mentally, help you lock in, understand, I've got this guy that did it when he was a young rookie. I've got this guy that did it when he was a young quarterback that had a lot of success, that listen to him, lock in. These are the things that I need to do, and it helped me out going into the games and throughout the games.
Did you actually ever meet Tony?
Way to end on a high note.
I love Tony.
I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes.
He even answered your trivia question about the Doomsday podcast.
I was curious about that.
I thought he should have gotten it right, because even though he's probably too young to remember or have watched.
Oh, for sure too young. He's 23 years old.
But he says he's an avowed Cowboys fan and has been all his life, and so I thought that was a nice way to test whether that is actually the truth.
Yeah, and the one thing I didn't get to talk to him about, because I'm way into college football, and to an extent I think sometimes worries you almost. Even what I'm wearing right now, in fact.
Some bear with a sick'em underneath of it.
Baylor t-shirt.
Is that a Baylor bear? It could have been a Northern Colorado bear.
It's a sick'em, buddy. That's our.
Well, I'm also a bear.
That's what we say. But Dak desperately wanted to go to University of Texas. And Mac Brown, I've always enjoyed talking to them about him. He just wanted to be a Horn. He grew up on Vince Young and winning that national title, and he fell in love with the University of Texas, and they never once recruited him.
Wow.
They never. And LSU came along late. but he honored Mississippi State was there early, and Dak said, hey, they were here.
Dak shouldn't feel terrible because I think Texas by far has the greatest number of starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and none of them went to the University of Texas. Is that right? Matthew Stafford. I remember talking to Drew Brees. Drew Brees wanted to go to Texas A&M.
The state of Texas,
He wanted to go to Texas A&M more than anything.
Yeah.
And then Texas was one of his backup plans, and he wound up going to Purdue.
Correct.
So there have been a high number of NFL starting quarterbacks, none of whom have gone to Texas.
Yeah, I don't think Breeze, it wouldn't have worked down there at Austin. They wouldn't have found a place for him. I think he ended up at the right place. And boy, that was fun to talk to Dak Prescott, even at kind of a hectic time, a chaotic room that we were in. And I thought you and I played right through it. I thought Dak, I would not be able to, even the professional broadcaster that I am, be able to sign balls, have somebody holding a mic, and sort of conduct the interview that he did. I thought that was pretty good.
He's a great multitasker.
I think that's
what millennials do. If they pay attention to anything, it's everything.
That's right, but
they don't focus.
For a young quarterback who has to think of a million things and go through progressions, being able to do that, I guess, should be something that he can handle. And it was great. And I got to say this to you, Ed. You're the one who made that happen. You're the one that made that interview happen. I mean, most times I think I'll bring in the big name guest, but I
got Wade Phillips last week too. But who's keeping track? Who's keeping score? Not me.
This instance, it's your relationship with all these folks.
Not bad for an unemployed guy. Is what I would say.
You're doing good.
And really, I'm not.
You're doing well.
I didn't know that. My first week of unemployment, I really should have been taking my wife to a jewelry store for hours at a time. Didn't seem like I should be more cost conscious now and budgeting differently than in controlling Miss Jill's lavish spending.
As you get more open with what's kind of happened to you, I'm going to share with folks sort of your situation, and I'm going to tell you why you should be spending more than ever. And I'll explain that as we go. But I want to let's jump back into the Cowboys a little bit. And one thing I wanted to talk about, we talked about a couple of episodes ago about the first 3 rounds. And I think that was appropriate. Now, the Cowboys continue to draft. Now, I have seen Cowboys drafts where about the third day, or it used to be like the second day, they seem like they were fatigued. And they just started, one year, it's just let's take a kicker. Why don't we in fact, you put Wade on the phone with me that year. I was in New York, and you put Wade Phillips on the phone with me because you were in Dallas because they took Beeler in the 5th round. And I was just what are they doing? They're taking kickers. This year, they finally took a offensive player in the 4th round. And that's who we want to talk about now. His name's Ryan Switzer out of North Carolina.
I predict already right now he will not be as good a 4th round pick as a rookie as last year's 4th round pick.
Now, going back to this interview with Dak, what did you take from what Dak said about Tony and even Aikman before him used to be asked by Jerry, hey, what do you think of these guys? Did you get the sense of his answer that he maybe did kind of like Switzer?
I think Dak said that he was vaguely involved in their draft preparations, that maybe he looked at a few guys that he had played with more than anything else or played against and offered his thoughts from those experiences. I don't think it was remember Jerry characterized Tony Romo's involvement as being something like, well, Tony is going to play 4 or 5 more years, but boy, he's really been back there grinding on the film, and he's going to tell me when the time is right to draft a quarterback and who that quarterback should be. Now, obviously, the time was right last year, and I don't think Tony thought that was the case, and I'm pretty sure he didn't say, I think you should draft Dak Prescott. But I think Prescott said an interesting thing about the 4th round pick and in fact, the 2 offensive players that they did draft, and that was that both of them in his mind are quarterback-friendly players, which meant that in the case of Ryan Switzer, he's a slot receiver. He's a guy who it's easy for the quarterback to get him the football and allow him to create big plays. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Cowboys drafted him, even though they have Cole Beasley, who by some metrics was the best slot receiver in football last year, the most productive, dependable slot receiver in football last year. But they drafted him because they didn't have a backup to Beasley. And so if anything happened to Beasley, an injury that put him out, they would have a different configuration of personnel. They wouldn't have that type of player. Now they do. They have two of them. And they feel like he plays right away in their no-back offense.
Yeah, and that, to me, that last point you made is very important. The no-back offense, I think it creates some more mismatches. And, Ed, with your grasp of the entire NFL and having been around the Patriots a lot, one thing that I thought when some of the reports were coming in, hey, this is kind of a redundant pick with already having Beasley, well, maybe we're not thinking enough about, like, the Patriots, the fact that at one point, now correct me if I'm wrong, they had Edelman, Welker, and Amendola on the same roster. I mean, all of those, I think that all those three guys were playing at one point, sort of overlapped.
Had Amendola and Welker.
Yeah.
Because there's that great piece of NFL Films video where Belichick puts in Edelman to return a punt early in his career. And he tries to poke at Welker and inspire him to compete for the position by saying, hey, I'm putting this kid in. And Welker's reaction is, good, I don't really want to do that job anymore anyway. And when he turns to Welker and he goes, way to compete, Welker, way to compete.
That is good. That is good. But bottom line is, they decide, hey, these guys are just football players. These guys are really, really good at what they do, and they have become matchup nightmares. I mean, think about this. New England has really done this in, one of the most unbelievable runs in the history of the NFL. The only year, one of those years they didn't win the Super Bowl was when they had Randy Moss. That's the only, though, sort of marquee. Now, Gronk, even when they had Hernandez, that looked like that was going to be this unbelievable tight end duo. But it is interesting that they have never had that, other than Moss, that just
a great
superstar. Yes.
Right. It's remarkable what Tom Brady's achieved, given the fact that, A, the Patriots really don't draft that well, and B, they really have not surrounded him with either a great runner or a great receiver. Now, like you said, Gronk is a unique freak athlete at his position, maybe, one of the top 3 or 4 receiving tight ends in football. But yeah, it is. I think coaches look at it, and it is really about matchups. And when you're talking about Ryan Switzer, it's, he can do some of the things that we do already. We have 2 slots on the field. It's just that Lance Dunbar, goes from running back to the other slot position. Well, now, instead of relocating a running back to have a second slot receiver, we could just play another receiver, and that's what Ryan Switzer will give them. He'll give them that sort of flexibility offensively. They can do it with a running back, or they can have a second slot receiver with a true slot receiver.
It is. It's going to be fun to watch. He also, I think we should have him on the Doomsday podcast because of that, partially because I want to ask him about that tattoo on the inside of his lip.
Which says?
That fascinates me. It says the word believe, and that's his mantra in life, young Ryan Switzer.
But it seems kind of a weird place to get a tattoo, am I right? I mean, I'm not well-versed in tattoos. I don't have any tattoos or piercings, for that matter, in case somebody might ask. But that seems like an odd place to get a tattoo. Like, what's the value in it?
Who would ask you, like, do you have any piercings? Is there anybody out there? And by the way, who, if you were going to get a tattoo, what would it be? I do think people wonder about Ed Werder and boy, you just kind of your day-to-day life, and it's an interesting one.
And I have time to get a tattoo now if I so choose.
You do. What would you want to get? Okay, let's just say you can't put Jill's name, because I think that would be your obvious choice. You guys you were like high school sweethearts. You've been married for like 55 years.
I always kind of like the barbed wire around the bicep kind of thing. I see myself as a barbed wire guy. In fact, we have a painting in our house of barbed wire. I don't know what that means.
That's an odd. So is that like a centerpiece in the house? I mean, I've really never been invited over to the Werder Manor. I feel like that should happen at some point. Did you and Jill go out and just say?
I don't feel like we should speak about our art collection.
Let's go shopping for barbed wire.
Really no, it was just, we just saw this piece when we were out somewhere in a different city, and it struck us both the same way, and it looked like it took up space in the right way, and so we bought it. But it is barbed wire.
It is interesting. Now, where do you you're a Colorado guy? That's where you're from originally. Is that the kind of art that you're drawn to, or is it kind of wherever you go?
Kind of Western, I guess. Yeah.
You do kind of like that Western type
motif,
thing.
Yeah.
So the barbed wire is not like above like a prison fence.
It's not razor wire. It's barbed wire.
Okay.
It's to keep cattle in, or wildlife like livestock. I guess it would be.
I was going to try to show you. I have.
You have a tattoo?
No, I don't have a tattoo. I have this.
You have an assortment of warts
huge,
and scrapes and scabs.
Yeah, I have this huge scar from barbed wire that it was like 22 stitches.
What were you trying to get away from?
I was in Pueblo, Colorado. In fact,
I've been to Pueblo.
Yeah, and we were the church bus had broken down.
Always the church.
Yeah, and I was climbed over the barbed wire fence on the way back. It grabbed
Is trespassing allowed in your faith?
It's just we're Baptists. There's you can really justify a lot if you just try hard enough.
Are we done talking about Ryan Switzer?
No. I would always. Ryan. We like Ryan, and we'll talk about him more in the future. May even have him on. There is a fascinating story that has emerged, and you saw it last year during the season. It's always funny. I think that's one of the reasons the draft is so enormous. It's one of the reasons NBA free agency is just huge. It's because fans have gotten to the point where they almost enjoy talking more about what might happen than actually what happens and what is happening in front of them. And so Jalen Smith, Cowboys' second-round pick last year, and I just want to say this, he was unbelievable, Ed, to watch as a player at Notre Dame. Now, he had this horrific injury, this knee injury, loses...
in the bowl game.
Yeah, in the bowl game, and again, that's just more reason why we're going to continue to have this debate. Should these players who are about to leave be playing in these bowl games? Some coaches are even helping them now and saying, no, I told them not to play.
Well, and what happened with Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey is only going to further bolster
I think you're right.
the idea not to go in the draft.
And it didn't hurt them.
4th and 11th in the draft.
Didn't hurt them at all. In fact,
maybe higher than that.
The new coach at LSU, Ed Orgeron, helped Fournette and basically said, no, I told him he shouldn't play. And so coaches are stepping in there. Jalen Smith, fans are fascinated about him. The Jones boys have been talking about him, Jerry and Steven, in glowing terms. And we know their medical credentials. These guys, they get medicine, these two. But they just cannot stop. And part of this, and I get it, it seems to be to support him in his rehab, to just say, Jalen, we still believe in you, and maybe keep him excited as he tries to come back from this. But partly, and we both have, for years, have known all the Cowboys team doctors and all that kind of thing. I still have not, I hate to be negative Nelly here, but I still haven't heard anything from the medical staff that suggests, yes, he's ready. We're only hearing this from Stephen and Jerry, it seems.
And of all the Jerrys, there's, GM Jerry, owner Jerry, sometimes head coach Jerry. Dr. Jerry is fundamentally the least believable of all the Jerry Joneses at the Star.
And that's saying something.
And so I think you're right. I think he would be the last guy to diminish hope for Jalen Smith because Jalen Smith's been very dedicated to this rehab. Jason Garrett will say no, he's one of their hardest working players, even though he never gets the reward of not only playing in a game, but even getting on a practice field. And that's forthcoming, it sounds like, but in a very limited way, 16 months after the surgery. And he's still wearing this AFO brace because he still has drop foot, although he has sensation now in some of the toes on that foot. So there's been some improvement, but not enough that at this point, if they had to play a game, he would do so without this brace, which everybody I've talked to in the NFL cannot see a linebacker who needs to be able to use his speed and change of direction, being able to do it with a device like this, holding his foot in a way that allows him to move properly. And he doesn't move properly without the device all this time later. I think it's interesting, though, to look at this in the context of time, okay? Because at this time last year, he'd just been drafted. And in anticipation of that, I talked to a number of general managers in the NFL after the Cowboys picked him in the second round about what they thought of that gamble. And I'll just read you a couple so that people can put it into context where he was and where he is now a year later. One said, I would have considered him as a pick in the 6th round. To me, it's 50-50 if he ever plays again. but he's a special kid and one of the best I've ever scouted, so I'm happy he's getting the opportunity in Dallas. Another senior personnel director said he's the best player in the draft. Any draft year, he would have been top 5. Dallas did the right thing. I think the second round might go down as one of the best ever picks in that round. Another team, I'm going to give you 2 more of these, said he would have been a consideration for them in the 4th round. Will play again, but not as a rookie. Probably not the exact same level, although possible. Will play again, but the level of play is completely unpredictable. And I think that's the fairest assessment of all. If he plays again, what level is he physically going to be able to attain? Is he going to be the great player that once he seemed likely to be, almost a sure thing pre-injury? Is he going to be an average player? Is he going to be a liability? You're not going to be a liability for long, but you have to give him credit for the work that he's put in and the fact that he didn't just go cash in his insurance policy and walk away from the game, right? I think if you talk to people at the Star who are directly involved with him, they would say nobody here is getting enough credit for even giving him a chance to play again. That's what they were facing. Like, with this injury, this kid should not have had a chance to play again. It was only because of Dr. Cooper's ability in the operating room. He's dealt with these, multi-ligament injuries many times over with success, with Jim Maurer and Britt Brown, doing his rehab, and with the kid himself. But no, it's not a sure thing that he's going to play again. And you are right. There's this utter fascination with this kid. All last year when they're going 13-3, I probably got asked many more times about Jalen Smith, who was never going to play last year, than I did, well, what about Dak Prescott's rookie year? What about Zeke Elliott's, rookie year? How's Dez playing coming off that broken foot? It's pretty amazing.
It's that being in love with sort of the unknown, and folks apply that to a lot of sports. Now, Ed, I wanted to say one thing, and I think folks with the Cowboys get frustrated. In fact, I know they do when doctors that don't know this injury or have ever looked at Jalen Smith start weighing in. One of these guys is
Dr. David Chow.
There he is. David Chow used to be with the Chargers, has had some issues there.
He's no longer the Chargers doctor
yes.
because he was sued for malpractice.
Correct. Now,
that being said, he's not entirely discreditable, and he's obviously more knowledgeable about this sort of injury than the common person would be.
Very much so. Now, he also loves being quoted, and now that he's not the only doctor like that. There are doctors out there that sort of sign up and do all these interviews. But anyway, he's an interesting guy who sort of tried to make a career on the side, in addition to being a doctor, from doing some media. And he wouldn't be the first person to do something like that. Now, I'll just say this. He had an interesting point. His point, and I'm following up with something you said earlier, was that the toe movement has literally sort of nothing to do. The fact that he can move toes with what he believes the true injury to be. And he says what it affects, the drop foot, is more like sort of in the back of the foot or middle of the foot, and that really toe movement isn't some kind of... So that sort of plays into our theory sometimes.
So he thinks this is not a very significant development as it relates to him getting control of his foot and being able to play.
Does not believe that it is. And
I think he also believes that if he was going to be able to play at a high level again, he would have experienced more sensation, more control of the foot 16 months later than he has to this point.
Yes, and I have to say this on a personal level, I kind of hate that I feel as cynical about his future as I do, because, again, I'll make this point. There's no defensive player I loved watching play college football in the past 5-10 years as much as this guy. He was dominant. But to your point earlier, too, I think he's such a special person that the Cowboys almost, Jerry, in his whole oil background, he truly does believe sometimes he can almost will, especially if there's someone that's as good a kid as this, by sheer force of will, which is partially how he became so wealthy and all that kind of thing, he can almost, if he says it enough and expresses enough belief, he can almost have some impact on this kid's foot. He wants this so bad for Jalen Smith.
And he wants it for Jalen Smith, but bigger than that, he wants it for the Cowboys.
Yes,
And he wants the justification.
He wants it for
that
him.
can only come of that pick and the general manager who made it, which is Jerry, if the kid winds up being a great player, because he used a second-round pick on a guy who so far has not played on a defense that desperately needed an immediate player at that position last year to accomplish what they might have been capable of doing.
Yes. So one year they get a kid with questionable character or baggage because of his history and Randy Gregory, and they followed up with someone of impeccable character but has injury baggage. It's interesting, at least this year. I have not had a single person tell me anything about Chido Awuzie other than was a great college player, and he's been underestimated at every level, and Cheeto's going to come in here believing that all those people taken ahead of him, he's better than. So,
quite honestly, that's the kind of player you want in the second round. I understand what Jerry saw and what the Cowboys saw on the tape of Jalen Smith and Randy Gregory, but there are other realities in play, and that's why they were available in the slots that they should not have been available, right? I mean, Jerry's got a long career of this sort of risk-taking, whether it's in the draft or it's making a trade or signing a player. He always believes with the right support, whether it's medical in the case of Jalen Smith or whether it's, substance abuse in the case of many other players or whatever it was Greg Hardy needed, that if he surrounds them with the right people in their organization, they're going to succeed. And the reality is it hasn't happened nearly as often as I think Jerry believes it has.
No, it hasn't at all. But if it happens once, that's really, it's like hitting a gusher. I mean, that's what he's always going to think about.
I personally, and tell me if you agree, I personally am more willing to give Jerry and the Cowboys the benefit of the doubt on a high character guy like Jalen Smith than I am a guy who's flawed like Randy Gregory or, Greg Hardy.
I'm personally not really prone to giving him anything like on I mean, I think at some point if you keep taking players with baggage, but hey, Sean Lee, he points to one. Hey, this worked. This guy was an ACL. It's the only reason he was in the second round.
Bruce Carter?
Yeah, who was okay. Who was okay with the Cowboys and then was able to go to San Diego, got a decent deal.
Bay?
To go to Tampa. You're right.
He's in Tampa.
Who was that that went to San Diego? Kevin Burnett, years before, another second-round linebacker. About the time, same year they took DeMarcus Ware, which we're going all the way back to about 2005, I think, for that callback. One other player that I think we should discuss today. And this is, speaking of the draft, this was someone who was considered a first-round talent that because of some circumstances, he ended up not going in the draft. The Cowboys signed him as an undrafted free agent, and now La'el Collins, who played at LSU, is will at least get a shot, it looks like, to replace Doug Free as the starting right tackle. And now, I don't want to get too carried away. I want you to react to this because you covered Larry Allen in the heyday. You covered the great Larry Allen. I'm not comparing those two players at all. What I will say is Larry Allen, very early in his career, showed to be extremely versatile and to be able to go out to tackle, move back to guard, played, 3 positions somewhere along the way. So, again, not saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but there is some precedent with an incredibly talented player. They found Larry Allen in the second round, and he ended up becoming one of the greatest linemen in the history of the NFL. There is some precedent with being able to move a lineman around, and that may be, at least back in the back of Jerry's mind right now.
Yeah, I think this is really all about trying to get the 5 best linemen on the field, and they suddenly find themselves with 2 openings, right? Because Ron Leary signed with the Broncos, and Doug Free, the right tackle, surprised them, or so it seemed, by retiring when he did. So they do have some vacancies. The thing that's a little bit surprising to me is they really have steadfastly said they like Collins inside, and they seem, if you look at their roster, like they have more tackles than they have potential guards. If he moves permanently, I'm not really sure who they're going to at guard, whereas it seems like they have more options with some of the tackles that they've signed. I guess they're thinking maybe Jonathan Cooper could play guard. He was, formerly a 7th overall pick of the Cardinals, got traded in the Chandler Jones trade to New England, spent very little time there, got cut, went to Cleveland, got cut there, and then the Cowboys claimed him and signed him on a 1-year deal. So he athletically, I know they loved him coming out of North Carolina, and obviously he made something of a favorable impression on him because it looks like he would be the guard to me if Lael Collins winds up going outside and playing tackle. And the other comparison I would say that we've already seen, you made an interesting point about the flexibility that we've seen with Larry Allen, and the Collins can do some of those same things. The other thing I think that distinguished Larry Allen as unique when you talked to Hudson Houck, his offensive line coach at the time, was his ability to stay on his feet and never go to the ground and always get down the field, on a sweep or a screen and be able to block multiple defenders as many as 20, 30 yards down the field. There were plays last year we saw Collins do that. And that was kind of one of the creative abilities that Larry Allen had that made him the unique player that he is in NFL history.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And sometime when, I know you've been making fun of me today for some of my tangents and some of the stories forever, but let me tell you, as a young Cub reporter for the Morning News, the time I got sent to Larry Allen's front door to go find him.
Is that when he was retiring
person. Early? That's when he was skipping some off-season workouts, and the great Bill Parcells, who believed in the clean and jerk. He and Larry had a different philosophy on what sort of weightlifting regimen. And you would think a guy like Bill would go, you know what, Larry is on his way to being in the Hall of Fame. I'll probably just let Larry keep doing what Larry does. No. And
he was the strongest man on the team, right? Yeah. He set all the records for bench press in the weight room.
Parcells wanted him in his. He didn't want him off at Lifetime Fitness or the local Y, wherever Larry was choosing to go. And so the Morning News
didn't seem like an Equinox guy.
Yeah. I was the only one who Larry talked to at the time. Until I showed up at his house.
That was the end of that. So you lost Sean Payton because you talked to his wife, and you lost Larry Allen because you showed up at his house.
In both of those times, I felt like an editor is who
pushed
kind
you
of messed. Yes, I feel like
interfered in your relationship.
It really wasn't totally my fault, and I try to explain those things all the time.
Maybe you just need to be stronger in standing up to your editors.
Exactly, but I had an editor and I just didn't know it at the Morning News who fought for me even when he should have fired me several times. And I was starting to feel myself a little bit as I grew into more roles and they started letting me be column. Yeah. And I just screwed up so much and I wanted to fight at all times. And he, instead of shutting me down, fought for me and desperately tried to get me not to leave to ESPN. And I, of course, like most people, left to go to ESPN and the rest
All right,
is
I'm going to
history.
give you an example of the kind of confrontation, shall we say, that I've had with an editor, a boss.
Okay.
I'm at the game when the Cowboys open as defending Super Bowl champions at the Bears on a Monday night. Michael Irvin did not play in the game because of the off-season substance abuse questions, cocaine. He was, accused of cocaine possession. Anyway, so he'd been suspended. And the Cowboys were not competitive that night on offense. They lost to the Bears badly, and my lead was something to the effect of the defending Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys season opener against the Chicago Bears, like Michael Irvin's off-season plea to drug charges, was no contest. Now, that is factually accurate. Michael Irvin did plead no contest, and if you watched that game, it was no contest. And yet, I had to fight with the editor until 1:30 in the morning. But I was not wrong, was I? Passion. No. That's passion.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's also.
That's all I want to say.
I think both of us. No, I think both of us have a tendency to, in our passion, we can come across as somewhat condescending, and I think some people have a hard time reacting to that. I'm I know myself enough to know that can happen. And my wife will tell me sometimes, she's like, I heard you talking to someone, and I'll change. I literally will try to change.
My wife would say, she would hear me on the phone sometimes, she'd say, you're going to get fired. You're going to get fired for that.
And we did, and here we are.
But I think,
here we are.
Quite honestly, I have to tell you, I think you have much bigger flaws than that. Your willingness to be confrontational, that's not one of your big problems.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, someday it'll be like Dr. Phil. We'll go through all of my problems. But yeah, I am very confrontational. And that was the Doomsday Podcast. Now, let me just say this at the end of this one, Ed. I think it's very important to do this. Folks need to subscribe to us. And you help me if I miss anything. iTunes, the Apple Podcast, a lot of folks coming to us through that. Stitcher, iHeart. Thank you.
Google Play.
iHeart. Google Play, of course. I'm still an Android guy, and that is available to you. And there's a lot of different places you can do it. Go ahead and subscribe.
And you can just follow us on Twitter, and we always create links.
We do.
On Monday mornings, which is when the podcast comes out, right? Drops, whatever you call it.
Yes.
It's free.
It'll come out, honestly, around midnight if our producer doesn't fall asleep. It'll come out like right at midnight.
Well, I know Keith's editing this out.
No.
Producer stepping in. To be clear, it comes out at midnight regardless. Just because I fell asleep before making the notification to you guys.
Hold on. I have a question.
It was available at 12:05 a.m.
So, did you fall asleep because you were bored editing the project? Like, was the content not to your standard and you lost interest and ultimately lost consciousness? Is that what happened?
Ed, let me tell you something. I'm a very valuable commodity at the moment.
Oh.
And I have lots of people vying for my attention, and I have a lot of projects on my plate.
Okay.
And I dedicated my Sunday to making sure that this got done on time. And then I passed out and I set my alarm, and my wife, when I woke up, my wife was like, oh yeah, I heard your alarm going off at like 11:30. I was wondering why you had it set. I was like, are you kidding me?
And somebody was texting him over and over. I'm up. What's going on? Let's do this. Let's retweet this.
Keith, we appreciate your dedication.
Yes, we totally do. And if we're not great at showing that, but keep subscribing. Keep subscribing. Do all those things, all those various ways, and thanks to everyone who continues to be a part of this. And thank you, by the way, Philadelphia. Keep coming strong. This is a Cowboys podcast. Cowboys podcasts are everywhere. But Ed and I will continue to talk about the rivals of the Cowboys, in particular the NFC East. So we want you guys as well.
How about the email address for those reviews?
Oh, man. Let's do that. The Doomsday Podcast at gmail.com. And then, Ed, give your Twitter address.
I believe currently it's at Ed Werder RFA, restricted free agent.
Okay, and I'm just at Matt Mosley. And thanks to everybody who's been a part of this.
So if you have a question that you'd like us to address on the next episode of the podcast, get in touch with us, and we'd be glad to consider it.
If you'd like to advertise on
If
here.
Keith is interested, we'll in the subject matter and can stay awake, we'll use it.
Thanks to Spoke
Who are you going to
Media,
get for a
way.
guest on our next
Stop talking
podcast?
over me. You want me to get the next one?
It's kind of your responsibility.
No, you're leaving town. My plan is to, I will have already, by the time people hear this, have gone out to rookie minicamp and recorded about 3 to 4 interviews with some of the new rookies. I thought that might be a good thing to do.
Good, I like it.
All right, peace out.
Good luck on the credential.
And the streets are all but empty. The bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes.
And we're out.
You got a lot of editing to do there.
No, you're fine. I like some of the goofiness.
We'll see if Matt's
anecdote
about World War II makes it.
Okay, Keith, that's one thing we got to explain to Ed. Like this, he has to remember this show is he's still under the guise of that we have to make it about like the Cowboys and other people. It's still mainly about us, and me talking about my grandfather is
It's
okay.
touching. It was really touching.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl, and some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.